Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We are your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic, and we have switched spots once again. Patrick, you are out in Arizona. I'm back home in the Chicagoland area. I missed the heat wave. The heat wave. You were home for 50s and sunny. Apparently, that is not what I am experiencing. So I'm a little bitter about it all, but I guess this is life.
Yeah, it's actually kind of 50s and sunny here right now. Not quite shorts weather, but I don't know if it's ever shorts weather in a professional working environment, but maybe that's me just being a cranky old man.
I disagree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the funny part is, like, normally this time of spring training, it's like kind of like a dead period, and you're like, all right, what do we got left? But I don't know. I kind of got back down here, and I'm looking at the calendar, and it's like, oh wow, we really got to kick it into gear here and get kind of our opening day stuff together, and like real stuff, real decisions are going to be happening, and I loved your PCA story. That kind of kicked off the week here. Then, of course, the next day he gets scratched from the lineup.
I saw that. I was like, oh, God.
For a hamstring tightness, which he said was nothing out of the ordinary. It was kind of one of those funny things at his locker where people are asking about, like, oh, the maturity it took for you to make this decision. And then we talked to counsel like half an hour later, and he's like, frankly, that was my decision. There was a conversation, and they do have a good relationship, but he goes out there and just is flying around the bases, not long after saying, well, we got to, take our time and make, there's a time and place for everything. And then, of course, he gets on the field and he's just flying around everywhere.
Yeah, and, that was kind of the idea of how good can Pete Crow-Armstrong be. That was kind of the premise. And look, he's not fixed. He's not an offensive superstar. He's not like, I'm not buying fully in the final 2 months. There were ups and downs even in those final 2 months. But I really like every conversation I have with him. I feel like I like him a little bit more. It's very unvarnished when you talk to him. He doesn't censor himself in multiple ways, right? Like, he'll tell you he's honest, and he also swears a lot.
Yes.
And I'm fine with it.
Which is great. Yeah.
But I just appreciate the honesty. I appreciate there's an awareness, right? Like, we talk about this a lot, like the cockiness versus confident, right? And there are people that aren't self-aware and they're cocky. They think they're being confident, and it's just like, this is coming across really poorly. That's not him. Like, he is well aware that he has work to do, that it's not finished. He's confident. I can be that player. That's my expectation for myself. I have work to do. I need to put in the work to be that player. He's confident he can be that star. And I liked it. I was like, I know players don't think in terms of WAR, but just with your defense and base running, you're a valuable player by WAR. And now if you add in what you did in that final 2 months, if you extrapolate that over a full season, he's like, oh, I've done the math. I loved that. It's like, okay, talk to some of his teammates, Hap and Swanson, some of the veteran guys in there, just to see their thoughts on his work ethic and what they think. And they had similar things, right? Two smart guys, two guys, like, especially Hap, when it comes to the numbers, he's well aware of those things. And he's like, he doesn't, they both were like, he doesn't need to hit, and he's going to be so important for us. But if he does, look out. Like, that's a scary player. And he's just fun. Like the spring training stuff, there was whatever day that was where he's running around the bases, Tuesday where he's running around the bases, and he had something else just like that a week prior. Like, he does it every other week. It's going to happen. If he gets on base, it's kind of like, we talk about the hobby comps, but that's what it is. It's like, I think it's a little more controlled than hobby too. It's more speed, right? It's a different type, but he's causing havoc out there, and it's in their head, right? Like, eventually they have to account for him, right? Whether it's now or 6 months from now, whenever, that teams will have to be like, it's one of those frustrations. Like if we get him on, if we allow him on base, he's in the pitcher's head, he's in the catcher's head, he's on the defender's head. I think that's something that you can't really measure.
Yeah, it is wild how, PCA gets traded for El Mago, and we see these similarities. And it's not just a fan media thing. It's how like the organization talked about him, about, okay, when he comes up, what can he bring? What can he do? Where should we place him? And it was the idea of when Javi came up, you could hit him towards the bottom of the lineup, and he would bring something every day to help you win. And Craig Counsell is a manager who we've both been told is obsessed with defense. Like he doesn't really care if young hitters don't hit. He's like, that young hitters aren't supposed to hit in the majors right away. He's willing to be patient and live with those mistakes so long as the player can bring it on defense. And that's what Pete does. I think that was well put, of just the idea of how sharp he is, and just the, like you said, sprinkling in F-bombs constantly. But he's also just like, he's just real, he doesn't really speak in cliches, but also nothing he says is like, that controversial. It's just like you said, very aware, thoughtful, forward-thinking, contextual. And, this is kind of the long wind up to what was probably the most interesting part of your piece, the idea of a contract extension. Could you see this happening? Should it happen?
So the question of should, I think, is interesting too, right? And
yeah.
Fans are getting annoyed by how much we talk about the salaries and the finances, I think. But guess what? It's a reality, and I think we're going to be talking about it for a while. So just get used to it, because it is something like this is not something we're making up out of thin air, is how I would phrase it. And I think if you're going to behave in this manner, where you're carrying a $210-ish million payroll and only raising that for exceptions here and there, you have to start thinking in the manner of, how do we lock up guys for good deals, right? And it's a risk. There's always the risk of it ends up like the White Sox, right? Where you sign the wrong guys, they don't turn into the players that you need, that you want to build around. There's also the upside of it turns into the Atlanta Braves, who have Michael Harris, Austin Riley, Ronald Acuna, Sean Murphy. There's probably Matt Olson. I mean, I think Albies, right? All these guys are on extensions that are just ridiculously cheap. Did the pitcher Strider, did he sign an extension? It seems like everyone did. I could be wrong. I don't like. There's so many guys. Is every one of those deals perfect? No, but is their payroll is not bloated. They have multiple stars on insanely cheap deals, including Acuna and Michael Harris. And you probably most of those guys that I mentioned, like it's just super cheap. PCA has, like we explained, the star upside, right? He has that upside. I don't think it's guaranteed, but I think from what we know about him and the people that we talk to, he has the kind of work ethic that you kind of invest in, right? My understanding of it all is, I quoted him. He's interested. He'll listen. He loves it here. This is the place he wants to be. He's interested. My understanding is the front office will kick this idea around. It's something that they have to think about, because they understand how the budget is structured, and these are the types of things they need to be proactive about. It's a different scenario than in 14 or 15, right? And perhaps it would have been they made the right decision. It almost worked out in their favor, right? Like some of these things, not getting extensions done. But there was also the World Series tax, I think, that they had to pay. That they, like, a lot of those guys were like, I want a World Series with the Cubs. That hasn't been done in over a century. Pay me, type thing. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have, but like there was that like World Series tax almost that they had to like consider when trying to extend these guys after 16. That's why you need to jump ahead of this, and it's something that they'll consider. It's something that PCA will listen to, and then we'll see if there's anything more than that. If even numbers are exchanged. There were some comps I gathered. The high end, and he's not here offensively, is Corbin Carroll, right? And then Michael Harris. He's not there offensively with either of those guys. He hasn't put up numbers like those guys. I think Michael Harris in his rookie year, his first full season, was 4.8 WAR according to Fangraphs. That's a really good rookie season. Corbin Carroll is like MVP caliber player when he's healthy. PCA isn't there yet. He hasn't shown that. I'm not sure if he has that offensive upside. I liked one comp I got was Ezekiel Tovar, who is stud defensively, signed last spring. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. They're all in the piece. I want to say it was like 760 something.
Sounds right.
And he won a Gold Glove, if I'm remembering correctly, this year at shortstop. 95 weighted runs created plus, so just a little below average offensively. I think that would be like, that's a pretty good comp in my mind. Like that's the type of deal that makes sense. Probably a little more than that, because I think he has more offensive upside than Tovar. We'll see if that's enough to get it done. If they want to offer that, what they, I have no clue what would be acceptable on either side. I just know that this is something that they'd be open to. Both sides would be open to. Let's see if they actually make any offers or if any traction gets made. That's the thing, right? Like we can talk about it all we want. Who knows if anything happens beyond like, oh yeah, we're interested, and then they never really go anywhere.
Yeah, I also think, kind of a front office that's, kind of on the end of its contractual term on a team that has a lot of uncertainty. I think you could make the case that I agree. I think PCA could be a star. He could be like an all-star this year who like leads this team into October. I also can't rule out the possibility that he gets sent back to Iowa at some point this year. That's probably, I think both of those scenarios are unlikely in terms of him like being a Corbin Carroll this year or him getting stuck in Des Moines, but I can't rule either of those out. And so I have a hard time seeing them getting the finish line. It's already it's almost March Madness, right? Like it's kind of like, I know they kick these things around in spring training. Like if we're talking about it, if fans are curious about it, people in the front office are talking about it because like that's their job. But I also kind of a segue here. I also really liked your Kevin Alcántara piece that came out, I think, the day before. Really interesting juxtaposition of, two guys who were part of that same trade deadline cycle. Kevin being traded for Anthony Rizzo, PCA in the Javi deal. And I think that deadline, we knew it was important at the time, right? Like it was a seismic trade deadline, but the more we kind of pull back from it, the more you see it's like they need these two guys. They need to hit on these two guys. And it's like, if not, the win can't just be not getting stuck with, say, Chris Bryant's contract with the Rockies on it. Like you need to kind of convert
you need
that.
some return.
And,
absolutely.
I think it's because we have to keep talking about the budget. I thought it was interesting that you kind of mentioned Alcantara. I was like, maybe this guy replaces Kyle Tucker next year.
Yeah, let's get to that. Let's take a quick break, Patrick, and then let's talk about Alcantara.
FT fam, if you love ripping packs of cards, there is a modern way to do that now on Arena Club with their slab packs and crats. I know you love ripping slab packs and getting that sweet card that you've always been looking for.
Yeah, and you don't have to go through all the other ones, all the Kratz cards that are in there. Bang, you just get the big one, the one that you're just peeking right around the corner when you open that pack, the one you expect to get.
Also, Arena Club will make you an instant offer for your card based on its market value. You'll get an instant offer of 90% of the estimated value, so you can accept it on the spot, simple, fast, and risk-free. Use that cash to buy more slab packs, and you can get your cards officially graded by Arena Club. So go check it out right now, FT fam. You can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul and then use the code FOUL. That's arenaclub.com/FOUL, code FOUL for 20% off your first purchase. Get after it, FT fam.
Yeah, is Kyle Tucker coming back or not is something we're going to be talking about during the season, after the season ends, once, whether they make the playoffs, put through the playoffs, whatever. If they make the playoffs, obviously he's going to be a big part of it, right? So my gut tells me, and everything that we've gathered tells me, it's a long shot that we know there's no extension coming. It's a long shot that they're able to re-sign him because the market for him is going to be wild. And they just haven't shown the ability to do that. And it doesn't seem like they're going to have the budget to do that. So that's where that stands. So it's part of the reason why Kevin Alcántara is still here. I kind of went into the offseason thinking it's a crowded outfield. He's so valuable as a center fielder. Do you need to move this guy to maximize value? But as after they got Tucker, and the more we've talked to people, I'm starting to think like there's a reason they don't move him and they're not like aggressively looking to trade him, is because they kind of do see a need to keep Kevin Alcántara around. Look, he's a really good player. He seems like a really talented player, I should say. He's an incredible talent. We talk about confidence. He's got it, and I I like his attitude too. Like you put him in PCA together in the outfield, you got some real swagger, and you got good defense, and you got guys that with the tremendous upside to hit. He hit this ball to the opposite field. I know it's spring training, but he hit this ball that he shouldn't have. Probably. I think how did DK put it? Dustin Kelly, the hitting coach, said he's like majority of the time I tell him not to swing at that pitch, but he swung at it. I couldn't see the pitch. I didn't watch a replay, but I think it was in on his hands, and he hit it like off the wall in right field. And this is a righty. Like he's so strong, and I think that's if he's the starting right fielder to open 2026, fans are going to be disappointed. I'm sure, right? They'll be disappointed that Kyle Tucker is not back. But I do think he has a chance to be a really good player. And I liked what Council had to say about him. Someone asked, does he have to play every day? Yeah, it'd be good if he plays every day at AAA. He's going to need a stretch where he plays every day, but there's also going to be stretches where he's up and he's helping this team, and he won't be playing every day when he's up unless there's an injury, right? So there's not a path to everyday playing time in 2025, but he's going to be up here at some point. He's going to be helping this team. But Council's point was like, if he gets 150 at bats total this season, that's a problem. But he's going to help this team, right? He's going to play every day at AAA, and then he's going to come up, and he's probably going to be on that bus back and forth overall, depending on need. I like him. I think he's talented. He's always been the guy that when you talk about the trades, from the moment they made those trades, people told me, like, if you're pointing to a star, if you're searching for a star in this system, that's the guy that has the chance. That's the guy. Before the Kyle Tucker trade, I think Cam Smith was on that track, and now he's getting even more hype. But I think Alcantara, not quite Cam Smith, because he's just it hasn't all come together, but he's young still, and it's starting to come together. 18 pounds, I think, of muscle, or 18 pounds. I don't know. Who knows if it's all muscle? 18 pounds is what he gained over the offseason, and that's part of the reason it's starting to come together. He's a little stronger. He can control the swing a little bit more. These long, lean guys can struggle to really control their swings, and it leads to swing and miss. But he's looked really good, and he's ultra talented.
Yeah, I love the Jaguar. That's his nickname.
Yeah.
Like, cool nickname. Like you said, some swagger. I think you gotta like the trajectory of. We kind of saw this with Jason Hayward, some of those guys with like just long arms, long levers. Like, it can take a while to like get into that groove. You know, the Cubs also like internationally like haven't like had a ton of impact recently for whatever reason. I know these are kind of like very long-term investments, but like if you get him to Wrigley Field, if he gets whatever 300 at bats at Iowa and some good major league exposure, and if you make the playoffs, and even if Tucker does go sign with the Yankees or whatever, I think you're okay with that if the Jaguar shows enough to be like a part of that mix, because the upside is that high. The Yankees were never going to have enough time to like keep him on the 40 man and kind of see it all the way through. And so, yeah, if you have those two guys playing next to each other for multiple years, that's be a pretty good outcome.
Yeah, and it is a way to, spend in other areas, right? We'll
sure,
see
yeah.
what happens and how this all plays out, what the budget is going forward, who knows, and then what the CBA looks like after 2026. All that stuff is going to, influence the way owners think and the way front offices act and how we have to kind of analyze things, because it's kind of up in the air, which is part of the reason why we don't see a lot of contracts, especially with the Cubs going beyond 26 right now. It's one of the bigger reasons, I think. Since we're on the theme of youngsters, there's Matt Shaw's back. He's healthy.
Yes.
All that concern. He is healthy and making a push for the opening day roster. What have you seen out there in camp? I believe he played Sunday. Neither of us were there, but he's playing in games now, and he's making plays at third base. I think you saw him make a play at third base, perhaps.
Yeah, I like the phrase "making a push" because I don't know. I kind of got back to Mesa and was just kind of, absorbing and listening to some of this stuff, and I had a hard time thinking like, oh, the Cubs are going to force it with Matt Shaw, and got a very swift response of no one is forcing anything. No one has to make a decision right now. He could show up later in the week and not feel as good, or something could happen to him or somewhere else on the roster. Like, these situations are fluid. I mean, we've followed this team for a long time. We know that the Cubs are generally kind of cautious and conservative with stuff like this. They're also very protective of 40-man roster spots. Part of me, kind of thinks that they would rather just kind of punt on this decision. But at the same time, he's a healthy player. He's their best prospect. He's the guy they want to be their third baseman this year. They're already down a Gold Glove second baseman in Nico Horner. So like maybe their best 26 won't necessarily be active that day, because you'll have, guys on taxi squads, like their decisions they don't have to make right then. But, Shaw is going to make it hard on them. I mean, he's showed up in camp, kind of on a mission. He had that setback very early in camp. And, it'll be fascinating to see what kind of wins out in the end here. Is it just that their huge amount of confidence in Matt Shaw, who he is and what he's going to become in the majors, or do they sort of kind of go into four corners and stall a little bit just to kind of preserve the roster? I think I'm sure you experienced this too. Like on one hand, it's like, oh, we love the player, X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, well, it's only 2 games and we still got 160 games to go. And like generally Counsell is pretty conservative in that regard, that he does take the long, especially for a manager, as of like being willing to kind of, maybe lose the battle to win the war. And we know how Jed Hoyer's front office looks globally at the 40-man and how they're obsessed with depth and paranoid about injuries with good reason. So I think that's probably the roster decision, right? Of like, that's going to be the headline, when you're you're in Tokyo, or as you're traveling to Tokyo.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think there's much, it's going to be obviously the bullpen, but as far as names go, like that's the decision. And then
None
the fifth
bigger
starter.
than Shaw.
Yeah. And the fifth starter thing is going to still be fluid in Japan because you're not using 5 starters, right? They're going to kind of they're going to use starters in a different way in Japan than they normally would. They're still going to be stretching them out and all these things. So Matt Shaw is the name to watch. And, and I think there's enough going on with the other third baseman contenders that is making it even more interesting, right? Like I don't like to look at the numbers for spring training, but Gage Workman and Vidal Brujan have done what they need to do to open eyes, right? You need to do something when you're on the fringes, right? You can't like Kyle Tucker. I don't know. I think he just got his first hit. I don't care. I don't care if he gets no more hits the rest of the spring. Yeah. He's on the team and he's going to be a star as long as he's healthy. Vidal Brujan, Gage Workman, all these guys that are fighting for roster spots matters a little bit. You just want to see it, right? You just need to see it because they need to do something to have a chance. They can't go hitless, otherwise they're not making the team. So so it's interesting, and Shaw has now that he's healthy, he got a couple hits in there. So it's all. I think it's all going. It all matters in a sense, I guess, is the bottom line, right? It's all interesting.
All on the table.
Yeah. And we'll see what the final decision is. Council said similar stuff, like we're not ruling anything out here, and like he wanted to be super clear about that. I was kind of like pushing, like, how many games does he need? Like, is he going to have enough? Like, this is a kid like that hasn't played a major league game yet. Like, you can't treat this like if Ian Happ was hurt, right? Like, which he was.
It's like
going
half
into last
of a
season.
normal workload that you get.
Yeah. And he's like that. He said it absolutely. It's a consideration, and it's something that's on their mind, but it's not gonna. He's like he's still able to make this team for opening day. So it doesn't sound like that's changed.
No, it hasn't. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think it's the decision that we'll be keeping an eye on. There's plenty more. There's we'll discuss more stuff, the edges of the roster, and we have a mailbag episode coming later this week, and I'm sure it's all about like a lot of roster questions will be in there. Ultimately it won't matter in some sense. I think we do it too. I'm not putting this on the fans. It's us too. We focus so much on the opening day roster. And I think Council's so good about telling us, like, he's really good about like, this roster will be different. Like, he's very open about it. He's like, if I have the same bullpen, in September, like, that's probably not a good thing. You need guys to step up. You need guys to emerge. So the roster will look different come September, especially if they're making a playoff run. But it's still fun to figure out and understand who's going to be a part of this team going forward. All right, Patrick, we'll be coming back with 2 more episodes this week. Thanks so much for everyone. Thanks so much to everyone for listening. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I are on top of all things Cubs. Thanks so much.